The discussion will be led by the Abdurrahman Satrio, who will act as Professor Pasco's interlocutor. Without any further ado, we will be first opening the event with a little bit prayer for 2 minutes. Let's start now. Okay, finish. And let's start our event today with singing our national anthem and March of Trisakti. Okay, audience is permitted to sit down. Following the second agenda, that we will be welcoming an opening remark from Ms. Siti Nurbaidi as the Dean of Trisakti University in addressing her opening remarks. The floor is yours.
I want to permission take off master. Thank you, Roberta. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The Honorable Five Deans, Dr. Wahyuni Wulandari, the Vice Five Dean. The second Five Deans, Dr. Ning Adiasi. The fourth Five Deans, Tri Sulistiawati, Dr. Sulistiawati. And the head of the study program, Dr. Maya. And of course, the Honorable Daniel Pasco, BA in Asian Studies, LLB, GDIP in Law, MPhil, DPhil, Associate Professor, City University of Hong Kong, as a speaker. It's a pleasure to meet you. Good afternoon. The Honorable Abdurrahman Satrio, SH, LLM, lecturer at Faculty of Law, as a moderator. Good afternoon. Nice to meet you too. The Honorable Mr. Pranoto Iskandar, the chairman of this organization committee and also founding editor Indonesian Journal of International and Comparative Law. Thanks for inviting me to give opening speech. The honorable of the lecture, all student and participation, I'm sorry I can be mentioned all of you one by one. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Best wishes for all of us. Salam Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. First of all, let's us give thank you to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the Almighty God. We are still given a healthy blessing and long life, so we can attend Trisakti public lecture series. As a part of lecture series with the theme Studying Law in Globalized World, a view from Hong Kong, Monday, December 5th, 2022. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. It's very important even to listen and discuss about the theme that will be delivered by Daniel Pasco. Ladies and gentlemen, is it to be known that today's event is a series of previous activities which were held on Saturday, December 3rd in this auditorium, Professor Suherman, with theme sharing experience on the ins and out of getting published internationally, is right? In terms of implementation of the law faculty's vision, that is to make reliable the law faculty with international standard with regard to local values in development, legal science to increase the quality of life and civilization. The achieve an international vision, I think that today's activity, which comes after Saturdays, will assist us in getting the Faculty of Law as a world class. So in this content, it's very important for us to know studying law in globalized for in particular view in Hong Kong, from Hong Kong. But how exactly can it get us there? It is worthwhile to begin by quoting Yogi Berra, who once said, remember that 90% of everything you accomplish in life is mental. We have to prove in the Faculty of Law, I think. Yes, it's true, 90% is accomplished in the life is mental. In relation to that, I would like to mention Dewey's pragmatic view of the human mind malleable. In that regard, along with Dewey, I wholeheartedly believe that Trisakti Faculty of Law mentality can and should be pliable to point where it can thrive in the context or ever increase global integration. I think we can give applause for Faculty of Law Trisakti. Ladies and gentlemen, Dewey has notable philosopher for the modern era. The convinces that the human mind is not something that stays, the same throughout our lives. He said that when we connect with more and more people and encounter more and more of the world, our understanding of what is true in the world changes and deepens. He states the value of making the most of the chance to learn about the world and to explore and practice new things. With Dewey's understanding of the mind running in the background, it is possible to see the main point of today's event, the acknowledgement of the importance of experience in making sense of these things or actions. In other words, it's critical to consider the embodied knowledge in order to better understand any activity, including how to analyze and produce scholarly texts. Without any further ado, let us listen to the presentation that will be delivered by Daniel Posco. But in this short time, I hope all the students and participants can make the best use of this moment, like us a lot of question, discussion, and gain understanding this theme, in particular a few from Hong Kong. And maybe it can get a comparative law with Hong Kong. With a clear understanding, we can develop legal knowledge, can be compete, and can be reckoned in the global world. But previously, with saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Trisakti public lecture series event with the theme Studying Law in Globalized World, a view from Hong Kong, Monday, December 5th, 2022, I officially start. Yeah. I hope this event can be useful for all of us. I strongly encourage every faculty member to continue the excellent cooperation, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the achievement as a result of this event. In the future, I hope maybe not too long, Faculty of Law Trisakti University and City University of Hong Kong can establish a cooperation in the form of Memorandum of Understanding and Memorandum of Agreement, and implementation of the Faculty of Law vision. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's the end on my speech. My deepest gratitude to Daniel Posco, who has been willing to be a speaker to give a studying law in globalized words, a view from Hong Kong. And also thank you to Abdurrahman Satrio as a moderator. Congratulations to the organizing committee of this event, who has been working hard to prepare this event. And thank you to all the participants who has been present this Trisakti public lecture series. Before I end this speech, I will present a rhyme in Indonesia. I hope you, Daniel Posco, can understand about the contents of a rhyme this below. Bunga mawar, bunga berduri, mekar selalu berseri, majulah Fakultas Hukum Trisakti. Jadikan belajar dan mental yang kuat untuk motivasi. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
First of all, thank you, Ms. Siti Nurbaidi, for your delightful speech. Well, we have come up to our main session. Let us begin with a public lecture with Daniel Posco, accompanied by Mr. Abdurrahman Satrio, discussing about studying in the law in a globalized world, a view from Hong Kong. Well, let us begin now, and you can take the floor, Mr. Satrio.
So good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to me to have a chance for moderating this event. Uh, Thanks also for our dean, Ibu Dr. Siti Nurbaiti, for facilitating this event too. Because without her help, I think it is impossible for us to have this discussion today. So today we will discussing about one of the most important challenge that we currently face in the midst of globalizations, and that is the pressure to make an internationalization of our legal education system. Of course, this is not something new issue. In fact, we already realize about this need as show and how we drafted the mission of our faculty that that were one of the mission state that we want to produce a graduate that can compete at the international level, so not only on the national level too. Uh, However, I believe this is a right time for us to start thinking about how to elevate these missions further. That is to make our faculty not only uh, can produce a graduate that can compete in the international level too, but also how to how we can make our faculty becoming more competitive at international level, or maybe we can start dreaming about how our faculty can shape the future of legal education globally. I know it's maybe quite ambitious, but and our guest today, Daniel Pasco, uh, I think is the right person to help us achieve that dream, because he's a professor at the City University of Hong Kong School of Law, and Daniel is also a well-known scholar in the field of law and society in Southeast Asia and comparative criminal law. In fact, Daniel write so many papers about, including about Indonesia, and his dissertation about the clemency issue, or what we know we commonly know as a GRACI, now has been published by Oxford University Press in 2019. And yeah, Daniel received his bachelor in both law and Asian studies from Australian National University, and then he completed his master and doctoral degree from Oxford University. So today Daniel will talk about the experience of his institutions in Hong Kong to perform internationalization program, which I believe will be very relevant for all faculty to learn, because at least if we look at the ranking, I know Daniel is a bit skeptical about that, but we can see that his institution constantly ranked higher in the ranking, in the world ranking, and they can compete with many law school in Europe and in America or in the Western world. So I think our faculty can learn much by learning from his institution experience, and beside that, Daniel will also talk about the opportunity for scholarship for studying in Hong Kong too. So which I believe will be very relevant from our student that attend here. Without further ado, I think Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Satrio, and also Dean, Ibu Betty, and also Ibu Retno, Ibu Silis, Ibu Ning, and Pran, of course. Terima kasih banyak untuk undanganmu untuk mengadakan pidato di sini. Mohon maaf kalau saya membicarakan dalam bahasa Inggris dan tidak dalam bahasa Indonesia. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak here at Trisakti this morning, and also on Saturday. As I said on Saturday, it's great to be back in Indonesia for the first time since 2018. And obviously the pandemic happened in between. And the pandemic was a curse, but it was also a blessing. It was a blessing in the sense that it enabled us a lot of downtime as academics to think about what we do, why it is we do it, how we could improve, and also how we might be able to shape our institutions, our law schools, should we have a blank canvas on which to do that. And I hope to share some of those insights with you today. I also look forward to speaking with you in the Q&A session a little bit later on as we discuss Trisakti's plans for internationalisation. And I also want to continue this conversation. I want to keep returning to Jakarta over the next few years for research purposes. So you will see me around in the future, hopefully. So what will I do today? Basically, after introducing myself very briefly, I'm going to talk about the internationalisation experience at City University of Hong Kong, which is my employer, in 4 different aspects. First of all, academic staff. Secondly, students and admission. Third, the curriculum. And fourth, research grants and publications. And what I have to say will hopefully set the stage for our full discussion during the Q&A session later on Trisakti's plans for internationalisation. But before I begin the substance, I just want to urge you to take what I say with a grain of salt, if you're familiar with that expression. It means don't believe everything that I say literally, okay? Don't take it literally. And the reason for that is that my experience in Hong Kong and also in Australia, where I grew up, is obviously quite different to your experience here at Trisakti and Indonesia more generally. I certainly don't wish to give the impression that there is only one way to internationalise, to have a global perspective, and that one way is the City University of Hong Kong way. Okay, that's not the reason I'm here. But hopefully you just, what I'm able to provide you with are just some ideas, okay? Some ideas, some of which you can take on, some of which may not be right for you to take on as you look to internationalise Trisakti's law school. So some of what I say may contradict earlier things you have heard about internationalisation. And of course, bear in mind that Hong Kong is fairly unique. It's a very unique place for those of you who've been there. It has a unique geography. It has a unique political system, and both of these shape the way that we think in Hong Kong about globalization and internationalization. As I go through, if you need me to slow down, or if you need to clarify anything that I've said, please just raise your hand, and I'm happy to do that. So first, in terms of my background, I'm from Australia, as you know. As Satrio introduced me, I completed my undergraduate degrees in Asian Studies in Bahasa Indonesia and Southeast Asian politics, and also a law degree at the Australian National University in Canberra. After graduating from ANU, I worked very briefly as a criminal defence lawyer in Canberra, so that is my main area of focus, criminal law. But I always had aspirations to do my master's and potentially my doctorate in another country, to go overseas to further my studies. And I got that opportunity in 2008, being awarded a graduate scholarship by Lincoln College, which is one of the constituent colleges at the University of Oxford. So I went to Oxford in 2008, and at Oxford over the next 5 years, I completed an MPhil, so Masters of Philosophy degree in Criminology and Criminal Justice, and then a DPhil, which is their name for a PhD in law. During the time I completed my PhD, Satrio mentioned that it covered executive clemency in Southeast Asia, so what we know in Indonesia as grasi. I spent quite a bit of time back here in Southeast Asia doing field work, not just in Jakarta, but also in Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. And then I moved to Hong Kong. Okay, so I moved to Hong Kong in 2014 to take up a position as assistant professor at my current employer, City University of Hong Kong, and I've been there ever since. When I first went to Hong Kong, I didn't like it at first. Okay, if you've been to Hong Kong, it's a very sort of unique street landscape. And I remember crossing the road, for example, and just being hit with a flood of people, right, who were coming in the other direction. Everyone pushing each other out of the way, and it was very hot. I was sweating, and I thought, I never want to come back here again, right? That was my first impression. But a few days later, I got used to it, and I got used to the food as well, and the climate, and the people there, and now it's my home, you know, and I've lived there ever since. So I'm 9 years into my stint at City University, and I was promoted to associate professor in 2020. Why did I want to go to Hong Kong? Okay, why did I want to end up in Hong Kong? Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, my academic work is on Asian legal systems. Okay, so Hong Kong is a particularly good place to do that work, but it's also a place that speaks English. Okay, the higher education is all done in the English language, although the language in the street is mainly Cantonese, so it's a dialect of Chinese. And as with many other foreigners, I still struggle, you know, very much to speak Cantonese, although I can speak some Mandarin. And so not only is English widely spoken, it's also a common law jurisdiction, which means that my training in Australia and the UK was relevant to the teaching there. It is an international city. And also the final reason was that, at least when I moved there, it was a sort of a liberal enclave of free speech within a part of the world where there are a lot of authoritarian governments. Okay, so particularly if I'm working on criminal law issues, it was important to live in a place with free speech, although, as you probably know, that space for dissent and free speech has shrunk in recent years in Hong Kong, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the rest of my speech. At City University, I teach and I do research. I teach in the areas of criminal law, evidence law, criminology, and also an introductory course to first-year students on the common law method. And I continue my research agenda, which mainly involves crime and punishment in Southeast Asia and in East Asia. I've also published a little bit of work on legal education, in particular on discovery-based learning, and I was fascinated to hear the Dean talk about Dewey earlier. Okay, so Dewey is seen as the father of discovery-based or active learning. And also on aligning the criminal law syllabus with what our students are likely to encounter in legal practice in criminal law in Hong Kong. So I've asked Pran to circulate some of those articles, so you will get a copy of some of my writing on legal education a bit later on. So enough about me. You've heard too much about me, but during what follows, what I want to do is provide some information on the way that my employer, City University of Hong Kong, has internationalised and continues to internationalise, but also some of the problems that we also face when we are adopting an international posture. According to the Times World University Rankings, Times Higher Education, the Times is a British newspaper, and they publish a ranking of one of the many rankings of global universities. And in 2020, City University was actually named the world's most international university, which is really striking. Okay, the number one in the world for internationalization. In terms of the overall ranking, you know, it wasn't as good as that. Okay, we were number 54, but in terms of internationalization, we were number one in the entire world. How do they measure these things? Okay, what goes into the ranking? Well, they have 4 factors: the proportion of foreign faculty, okay, out of the entire faculty. Second, the proportion of international students out of the whole number of students. Third, the proportion of research papers that involve collaborations between domestic faculty and foreign faculty based elsewhere. And fourth, the global reputation of the university as measured by an international survey. Okay, so again, those 4 things were: what proportion of the teaching staff are foreigners? What proportion of the students are foreigners? What proportion of the research that we produce involves collaboration between foreign scholars and local scholars? And fourth, what is our international reputation when it comes to internationalization, okay, measured by a survey? Each of those contributes 25% towards the ranking. In terms of the scores, I'm not sure about international collaboration, and I'm not quite sure about the results of the survey, but what I do know is that in 2020, more than half of our faculty, so we have 3,000 staff, and more than half of them come from outside of Hong Kong. And of the students, 35% come from outside of Hong Kong. But Satrio mentioned earlier that I have some, personal skepticism over rankings. I have some doubt over rankings, and I think you need to take these rankings with a grain of salt again, and also you need to query the methodology that goes into the rankings. There is a very important caveat with these rankings, and that is the fact that mainland China counts as a separate country or jurisdiction from Hong Kong for the purposes of the rankings. So that means, even though they're technically part of the same country. So, for instance, if a student comes from mainland China to study with us, they count as a foreign student for the purposes of the rankings. If a staff member comes from mainland China to work with us, it also counts as a foreigner for the purposes of the rankings. If our staff write a paper with someone from mainland China, someone based in mainland China, that also counts as an international collaborative paper. So all of this contributes towards internationalization rankings. As you probably know, politically, in 1997, 1st of July, Hong Kong was handed back from the UK, it was a colony of the UK, to China, the handover day in 1997. I remember watching it on TV, in Australia when I was much, much younger. And in that process, China adopted what's called the One Country, Two Systems framework. Okay, part of the promise to allow to incentivize the British to hand back Hong Kong was to allow Hong Kong to maintain its existing way of life. And that extends to the legal system. Okay, so we have a common law system in Hong Kong as opposed to the civil law or socialist legal system in China. And it also extends to the education system. Okay, we have a separate education system from mainland China. And there are a lot of other differences, even things like currency. Okay, we have a separate type of money. We have a separate plug on the wall where you plug in power. Okay, we actually use the British plug, okay, rather than the Chinese version. We drive on the left-hand side of the road, okay, like Indonesia does, rather than the right-hand side, which they do in China. So there are a lot of differences which are still maintained under this one country, two systems arrangement. And in particular, the legal system is different and the education system is different. And so if you were cynical about these rankings, which I am a little bit, okay, you would say that this is the real reason why all the universities in Hong Kong, not just my university, but all of them, score very highly in the internationalization rankings. That's because Hong Kong is treated separately from mainland China, and mainland China is the source of a lot of our students, a lot of our staff, a lot of our academic collaboration. And certainly there's some truth to that. That's one of the reasons. I think true internationalization would result from mixing on campus and off campus. Okay, we want to mix people from different cultures, different ethnicities, different educational traditions, both in Hong Kong on campus and also off campus via collaborations. But having said that, I think that we're obviously doing something right about internationalization. And I hope some of our experiences that I'll go through prove useful to you as you think about how to do this in Trisakti. Certainly, City University of Hong Kong, we've developed an identity, okay, a self-identity as an international university, and we certainly market ourselves in this way. It's not purely a domestic university. And as I mentioned, the geography of Hong Kong is unique and it helps. Okay, so as a legal jurisdiction, it's only one city. Okay, it's like Singapore, just a city-state, essentially. It has a services and a trade-based economy. So because of that, we are forced to look out. Okay, we cannot look inwards. We need to look outwards at the rest of the world, and in particular, the rest of Asia. So that's a little bit of introduction to internationalization and what that means, but now I'm going to go through internationalization in terms of staff, then students, then the curriculum, and finally research and grants. So let me start with staff. I mentioned that the rankings are partly determined by the percentage of foreign staff in the institution. All 3 law schools in Hong Kong have a lot of foreign staff. Okay, so City University of Hong Kong is one of them. There is also the Chinese University of Hong Kong. It doesn't mean there's anything particularly Chinese about it, but it's just called the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And then there's Hong Kong University, okay, which is the oldest one. Okay, so there are 3 law schools in Hong Kong. All of them have a lot of foreign staff. Whether or not you define foreign as including mainland China or not, they all have a lot of foreign staff. At City University, we currently have 38 full-time staff. I'm not sure how many there are at Trisakti. Is that probably fewer than Trisakti? No, all of the staff. Right, so it's half the size, right? It is half the size in terms of the full-time staff compared with Trisakti. We have a number of visiting staff and a number of part-time lecturers and part-time tutors, so I'm not counting them, but of the full-time staff, 38 staff, of the professors, 13 are from Hong Kong, 10 are from mainland China, and 15 are from elsewhere, okay, so are foreigners. 13 from Hong Kong, 10 from mainland China, 15 from elsewhere. And so it's a fairly even split between those 3. Of the foreigners, there are no more than 2 foreigners from any one country. I don't think it's been planned like that, it's just a coincidence, but the fact is it's a spread of countries represented in the faculty. We have foreigners from Singapore, France, the UK, the US, Greece, India, Malaysia, Australia, Italy, the Philippines, and Taiwan. And I know, obviously, politically, Taiwan, there's dispute about whether it's a separate jurisdiction to mainland China or not. Importantly, though, all of these 15 foreign staff, even the ones who come from civil law jurisdictions, like the Philippines, or like Greece, or like France, for instance, they have each some training from common law jurisdictions. That means all of the 15 have one degree at least, usually a master's degree or a PhD, from an English-speaking common law jurisdiction. And most of our mainland Chinese staff also have these degrees, okay, from an English-speaking common law jurisdiction like the UK, the US, Australia, Singapore, and so forth. This is one of the distinct advantages of the common law system. Okay, as you probably know, in the common law system, courts cite other courts in other countries, okay, and we borrow ideas from other countries' courts. What that means is that the training and the expertise of our staff in other jurisdictions is directly relevant in Hong Kong as soon as they arrive. They don't need to retrain in language, they don't need to retrain in their legal outlook, but whatever they've done in their own countries is relevant as soon as they arrive in Hong Kong. In terms of the Hong Kong-born staff, I mentioned there are 13 Hong Kong-born staff. It's still quite common for Hong Kong parents to send their children away to study in the UK, okay, because that was the tradition. And so most or all of our Hong Kong staff actually have degrees from the UK, and then they return to Hong Kong to practice law a bit later. In terms of actual British, though, for me it's a surprise that we only have 2 British members of staff, considering that Hong Kong was, until quite recently, a British colony, and its legal system is based on the UK's. But if you want to count the number of staff with British university degrees, like myself, even though I'm not British, the number would be much higher, okay? Now, a couple of challenges that we face in terms of academic staff and foreign academic staff in particular. Obviously, as with everywhere in the world, the pandemic hit Hong Kong quite hard. And until quite recently, we had hotel quarantine in Hong Kong. You were essentially detained, imprisoned, right? Ditangkap, right? In hotel quarantine for 2 or 3 weeks the moment you arrived, before you could be released. And this obviously drives people crazy. There's also the changing political situation in Hong Kong. So both of these two factors, the quarantine and the changing political situation, meant that we are no longer as attractive a destination for foreign staff as we perhaps once were, particularly academics from Western countries. Even now, when I go back to Hong Kong next week, I have to wear a mask everywhere I go. So apologies if I haven't worn a mask much in Indonesia, but it's a relief for me, right, not to have to do this, because I have to do it outdoors, indoors, everywhere in Hong Kong, or else I get fined $5,000. So there's still the mask rule. There's still the rule that in the first 4 days when I return, I cannot go to any venue where I would need to take my mask off, like a restaurant or a bar or a gym. Okay, so 4 days. So in effect, we still have some kind of quarantine. It's just not hotel quarantine. So anyway, all of these rules, okay, and also the political protests in Hong Kong in 2019 meant that a lot of foreign families left. And we are down by 50%, okay, of the number of foreign or expats, you know, Western expats in particular, who live in Hong Kong now, compared with 2019. So we have lost some staff, and we need to hire some new staff. The solution for the moment seems to be to hire, we want to maintain our international identity. So what do we do? Okay, the solution seems to be to hire staff who are culturally well suited to Hong Kong. Usually that means they are ethnically Chinese, but who have significant international experience and international qualifications. And they may even have foreign passports as well. The people we've recently hired tend to be Chinese, and they did their undergraduate degree or maybe even their master's degree in China, but then went overseas to do their doctoral degrees. Okay, they went to the UK or US in particular. So they are Chinese, but they are sort of international Chinese, if you will. So that's for our permanent staff. In addition to our permanent staff, how else can we internationalise our staff? We have a number of programs for foreign scholars undertaking sabbaticals. Okay, so that means they have research leave from their own institutions, and they come to join us for 6 months to a year, and we give them an office, we give them access to printing, access to the library, and we also give them a platform to discuss their work in front of our faculty, and we provide feedback on their work. This is a very good way of boosting the international profile of our school. We don't charge any money to people coming in on sabbatical, unlike, let's say, US universities, which charge quite a lot of money for this. So we accept people for free, and they benefit. Okay, they get our staff to comment on their work, and we benefit by increasing the international profile of our law school. So that's the first challenge. Okay, the first challenge is pandemic and quarantine and the political situation. The second challenge, I think, is more general and not specific to the last few years. In terms of internationalisation, we simply struggle to retain foreign staff for the long term. What I mean here is that Hong Kong has always been a transient place for foreign workers. It's a bit like Singapore or Dubai. Okay, the tradition is foreign workers in the financial industry come for 2 years or 3 years, and they gain some international exposure, some Asian experience, they probably save some money, and then they go back home. Okay, so this is typically the model for foreign workers coming into Hong Kong, particularly in the financial services sector. But that model doesn't work so well in the university context. We want people to stay for a longer period. It greatly helps with the morale of the law school, with the identity of the law school as an international place, and with the institutional memory, let's say with teaching and with administration, if you can keep your foreign staff for a longer period, okay, not just 2 or 3 years, but a decade or more. How have we tried to do that? Well, there are a few solutions. One of the solutions is the sort of American-style tenure system that we have. You have 6 years to get tenure. Once you get tenure, you cannot lose your job until the compulsory retirement age of 65 in Hong Kong. And so the tenure system means that there are some harsh results at the earlier stages for people who don't get tenure. Okay, they have to leave. But if you do receive tenure, you have a guaranteed job, for life. And particularly for foreigners who receive tenure, this incentivizes us to remain in Hong Kong for more than 2 or 3 or 6 years. Okay, they want us to stay for 10 years or more. How else can we incentivize foreign staff to stay? We offer sabbatical leave. Okay, so normally every 3 years you have 6 months of sabbatical leave. It means it's a type of research leave. You can go abroad. You can even go back to your own country to undertake a research project for 6 months. And of course, each year the time outside of teaching in the summer is more flexible. Okay, so outside of teaching in May, June, July, and August, we can also go overseas to conduct research projects and to go to conferences and to give speeches in Indonesia, this sort of thing. Ultimately, though, the sort of staff who are attracted to move to Hong Kong, to a place like Hong Kong, tend to be 2 types. Okay, they're either at the very beginning of their careers, like me, as I was when I moved, or they're much more senior, being at the full professor level, and they have adult children already. The reason for this is because Hong Kong is seen as a difficult place to raise children. Okay, there are long waiting lists to get into schools in Hong Kong, private schools I'm talking about. There's the high cost of living. There's the culture which involves working all the time, okay, long working hours. And there's also, as you probably know, our very small apartments. And I was telling Pran and Satrio about, I live in a 50-meter square apartment. Okay, so for all of those reasons, it's a very difficult place to raise young children. And so the sort of people we attract, as I mentioned, are people from the very beginning of their career or towards the end of their career. In other words, people with fewer family responsibilities. What this also means is that we tend to attract more men, foreign men applying for these jobs rather than foreign women because of the family issue. And that's something we need very carefully to bear in mind as we hire new people, okay, as we seek to strive for a gender balance in our faculty. Okay, so that's about staff. Any questions about staff before I move on? I suppose the students are interested in what I have to say about students, right? So, and the curriculum. Let me go to that section. So I'm going to talk about students and the admission process. So how do these reflect our international outlook? Now our students are a mixture, okay? They're a mixture of Hong Kong local people, of mainland Chinese, and of some foreigners, okay, or international students. When I say Hong Kong locals, those of you who haven't been to Hong Kong, I mean Cantonese-speaking people from Hong Kong. 92% of the population of Hong Kong is ethnic Chinese, but there are a number of ethnic minorities in Hong Kong. And certainly in my classes, I also have students whose heritage is from India or Pakistan or Nepal or the Philippines or Thailand, but they tend to have grown up in Hong Kong and they speak Cantonese fluently. Okay, I can't speak Cantonese, but there are lots of South Asian people in particular, Indians, Pakistanis, who can speak very good Cantonese in Hong Kong, and some of those are in our classes. The majority, though, of our Bachelor of Laws students, the vast majority are from Hong Kong. The majority of our Juris Doctor students, Juris Doctor being the law degree you take if you've already got a first degree, are from mainland China. Okay, and the majority of our LLM students are also from mainland China. So certainly the Bachelor of Laws are Hong Kong local people. I should have said JD is about 50-50, okay, 50-50 Hong Kong locals and mainland Chinese. We have very few genuinely foreign students, and what I mean by that are not just, you know, ethnically foreign, but also students who pay fees at international rates, okay, who've moved to Hong Kong just to study a degree. But one way that our university has sought to overcome this barrier is to sign a lot of exchange agreements. Okay, the Dean mentioned earlier about a memorandum of understanding. We have done that with lots of universities, and we get lots of exchange students into our programs, including in my classes. For instance, I mentioned I teach a first year introduction to the common law subject. In that class every year, I have about 70 students, and usually about 10 of them come from Europe. Okay, so they are exchange students who come typically from civil law backgrounds, places like the Netherlands or Germany or Denmark or Belgium or France, Spain, and they come to learn about the common law in Hong Kong on exchange. Usually they are Caucasian students, or what you know as oleh, right? Usually they are ethnically Chinese students whose families live in places like the Netherlands or France or Germany or the UK. And so essentially they are Europeans, but they're looking to return to Hong Kong, or not return, to go to Hong Kong on exchange to have a kind of a student experience in an Asian environment. Okay, they may not have grown up in an Asian culture, even though they are ethnically Chinese. So they're looking to come to Hong Kong for this kind of experience. And I think they enjoy that. Hong Kong is the perfect place for that, because it is a bit like Singapore, a place where East meets West. Okay, so a lot of fun, and the number seems to be growing each year. So that's one way to internationalize, okay, if you can't actually attract students to your full-time programs, okay, to get more exchange students in. Now, I also, as Satrio mentioned, I also want to use this opportunity to promote some of our programs, okay, so we do have an LLM program, an MPhil program, and a PhD program, and I've asked Pran to provide some slides or a handout on these programs that we will distribute to anyone who wants one a bit later on. The reason that the PhD program in particular contributes towards internationalization is that this is part of the Hong Kong government's agenda. Okay, they want more foreign PhD students in Hong Kong. And by foreign, the definition here is from outside of Greater China. So for these purposes, the People's Republic of China doesn't count as foreign, nor do people from Taiwan or Macau, for instance. We want people from other jurisdictions. And so the Hong Kong government is making a big push towards internationalization of the PhD programs. What that means practically is that if, both in terms of admission and in terms of getting scholarships, it is easier to do that if you come from outside of China. Most of our applicants come from mainland China, so we're seeking to change that. We're trying very hard to promote our program in places like Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Nepal, India, Pakistan, and of course, Indonesia. Obviously, if you come to do your PhD with us, the dissertation must be written in English. So that's a barrier, you know, to a lot of students. But what's not a barrier is the legal tradition from which you come. So it doesn't matter if you come from a civil law jurisdiction like Indonesia, so long as you speak English well enough to write the dissertation in English. Certainly, most of our Chinese students come from civil law backgrounds, okay, like they have in mainland China. If you study something like public international law, private international law, arbitration, shipping law, human rights, international economic law, these sorts of subjects are not specific to the common law system. Okay, so we do accept people from other types of legal traditions. In our current cohort is an Indonesian PhD student, okay, Junianto James Losari, and he is in his second year PhD with us. He was a graduate of Universitas Pelita Harapan it's in Tangerang, right? And then I think he did his master's degree in Europe, and then now he's come to do his PhD with us. So he's an example of an Indonesian student, the sort of student we're trying to attract. And he is working on evidence in international arbitration proceedings, and he's funded by the Hong Kong government's PhD fellowship scheme. I can put any of you in touch with him if you want me to put you in touch with him. And so what type of PhD students do we have? Well, again, we have some students from Hong Kong, some students from mainland China, some students who are foreign. Hong Kong, there are only 3 current students. I suppose the reason for the low number is that students in Hong Kong tend to want to work in corporate law, okay? They tend to want to make money, right, rather than becoming lecturers, okay? We have 18 students from mainland China, and we have 8 foreign students. And the 8 foreign students actually come from 8 different countries. Again, that's not a requirement, it's just a coincidence. We have students from France, Bangladesh, Taiwan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Kenya, Nigeria, and India. So you can see our need to diversify away from mainland Chinese students. 18 from mainland China, 8 from foreign countries, and only 3 from Hong Kong. I should also finish this section by saying that we also have scholarships for LLM applicants. Okay, they're internal scholarships, they're not funded by the Hong Kong government, but they also apply to foreign students, and there's equally an internationalization agenda with our LLM student population as well. So, for anyone who's interested, I'm happy to talk to you a little bit later about our programs, LLM, MPhil, PhD. Any questions about students? Internationalization of the student body? Yes?
Is there any introduction common law for the candidate of LLM? The LLM perspective?
Yes, there is. Yeah, and in fact, if you take a PhD, that course is compulsory for your PhD. If you take a LLM, it's not compulsory, but you can take that course. I think, let's say some students from mainland China, they don't take that course, but let's say they really just want to focus on arbitration. Okay, so they take 8 courses on arbitration in their LLM. Or they really want to focus on public international law. They can take all public international law courses. But if that's what a student wants to do, yes, there is the option to do that. Any other questions? Yes?
How long is the LLM?
It's 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. But I suppose as a foreign student, one year. Okay, let me now talk about something which is related, which is the curriculum. Okay, what subjects we study and how they reflect internationalization. And here I'm talking not so much about LLMs, but mainly about LLB. So that's the equivalent of your Sarjana Hukum. And the JD degree. JD is the type of law degree that they have in the United States, where you come with another degree first, and then your law is your second bachelor's degree. So you normally come with a Bachelor of Arts, and then your law degree is second. So we have both options, both streams, LLB and JD. Now, of course, the content of the curriculum, that is which subjects you study, doesn't contribute directly to the university rankings in internationalization. But it does contribute indirectly. If we internationalize our curriculum, as you might do with Trisakti, then it will help to attract foreign staff to teach those courses, and it will help to attract foreign students to take those courses. So indirectly, if you change the curriculum, it can affect internationalization. The other factor that we need to take into account in designing our curriculum is the political context. And the political context, as I mentioned, was the one country, two systems arrangement between Hong Kong and China. So Hong Kong being a a common law island or common law enclave within a broader, a bigger country which has a different legal system, which is civil law or socialist law. And so, because of that political context, we try to train our JD and LLB students not just in common law, but also in Chinese civil law. Particularly given the ever greater links between Hong Kong and what's called the Greater Bay Area. The Greater Bay Area is the conglomeration of cities in Guangdong province in China, in southern China, like Guangzhou and the surrounding cities there, Zhuhai, for instance. And Hong Kong is a part of the Greater Bay Area in China. So the practical implication is that many of our students will end up, after graduation, working in the Hong Kong offices of mainland Chinese law firms. And some of them may even be working in the Beijing or Shanghai offices of international law firms. So they need two things. They need a grounding in the common law and a grounding in the Chinese civil law at the same time, in order to do things like cross-border transactions. They also need language skills. Many of the international firms in Hong Kong only hire graduates that can speak 3 languages, which is very tough, right? So they need to speak Mandarin, they need to speak Cantonese, and they need to speak English, and they have tests for all 3 of them. Okay, so the students, not only do they need these language skills, they also need some legal grounding in both common law and in Chinese law. And so with that in mind, we had to internationalize our curriculum, or tailor our curriculum to these, with these requirements. So what subjects do we have? In terms of the international subjects, I mentioned we have private law of the PRC and public law of the PRC. They're both compulsory courses for LLB and JD students. We have various optional courses on public international law and private international law. We have a course on business law in the European Union. And we have a number of mooting courses. Do you do mooting in Trisakti? Yeah, okay. So most law schools are familiar with this. And mooting is obviously a great way to meet students from other jurisdictions, and also to advertise our law school to other law schools, because our students obviously compete domestically. If they win the domestic competition against the other law schools in Hong Kong, then they go internationally to compete, let's say in the Viz East moot or in the Jessup moot, which I'm sure you're also taking part in. So that's one opportunity that we take to try to internationalize the curriculum. The second opportunity we offer our students is the opportunity to go on exchange. And this is something that you may think about in Trisakti as well. We have 2 types of exchange in our curriculum. We have the first, which is called GLEAP, which is basically just a summer school at University College in Oxford, which is one of the constituent colleges of the University of Oxford. And students go over there just to take one subject, and the one subject is European competition law. And I know that some of you were interested in competition law in this room. So that's the GLEAP program. And then we also have our regular exchange programs, which are created through bilateral agreements with other universities. So 2 universities sign an agreement, and then students can go both ways, okay, usually for 6 months at a time. Now, some of the problems we face with exchanges, okay, most of our students end up going on this GLEAP, or many of our students do. So they go to Oxford for this summer school, and then they come back to Hong Kong. We are trying to encourage many more of our students to go on the full exchange programs for 6 months, but they're very reluctant to do this. Most of our students don't want to go on exchange for 6 months. Why is that? Well, we spend some time thinking about this. Maybe it's for financial reasons, okay, because they live at home with their parents, and it costs more, to rent a place overseas. So it could be financial reasons. It could be because they get homesick Okay, they've never lived away from home before, and it's, that's a challenge. But I think the main reason is that sometimes our students are scared that going on exchange will affect their grades. They think that instead of staying at home and taking easier elective subjects, those subjects are replaced by an international exchange. Okay, so we're trying to work around, those issues, because we really want our students to go overseas for 6 months. It is very valuable for not only your education, but also as a personal experience. Okay, to live abroad for 6 months and to do things yourself is very valuable. We have even tried to, one of the ways we've tried to do this is to rearrange our curriculum so that there is a break for 6 months with no compulsory courses in the 6 months, just elective courses. And so that provides an opportunity, I think in the 3rd year of the studies, for students to go away on exchange. Hopefully, given that the pandemic is, receding, more of our students will go away to foreign universities on exchange. And one thing that I'm struck with, in fact I'm impressed by, is that the European students who come to my classes on exchange, often it's their 2nd exchange they've gone on. So they have a 4-year program, just like you do, and they spend 6 months of that on a exchange within the EU, pursuant to the Erasmus program. So if you're in the Netherlands, maybe you go on exchange to Spain. Or if you're in Germany, maybe you go on exchange to Italy, that kind of thing. And then they take a 2nd exchange. And the 2nd exchange tends to be somewhere outside of the EU. So they go to typically somewhere in North America or Asia or even to Australia. So the point is that the European students go on 2 exchanges during the course of their studies. We are struggling to convince our students to go on 1 exchange. So that there are some different cultures there, and the end result is that we actually have more students coming into Hong Kong on exchange than we have students going out on exchange. So I'd be interested later hearing about your experiences in this regard in Trisakti. In terms of the agreements, I mentioned that to have exchanges, you need to sign agreements with other law schools. And as of the current time, we have agreements with 19 different countries. And the agreements are with universities in Austria, Belgium, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Israel, Italy, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, Singapore, Spain, Switzerland, Taiwan, the Netherlands, the UK, and the US. So that's a total of 19 different countries. We've also signed an agreement with Georgetown University, which is in Washington, DC, in the United States, to enable our students to take a combined LLB and JD and LLM program. What that means practically is that some of the courses they take with us contribute towards their LLM later in Georgetown. So they reduce the time it takes to get an LLM. But I mentioned the 19 countries, and it's quite striking to me, 2 things. First of all, we don't have an agreement with any Indonesian university. So that means that our students can't go to Indonesia, and Indonesian students cannot come to us for the moment. And also, I feel quite sort of disappointed that we don't have an agreement with an Australian university as well. New Zealand is there, but not Australia. So unfortunately, that's not within my responsibility to fix. That's the associate. We have an associate dean of international programs, as you do here, and that's that person's responsibility to look at. But we're always looking to sign new agreements, and that's something we can perhaps work towards in the future with Trisakti or other universities in Indonesia. So, any questions about the curriculum and how that contributes towards internationalization? Okay, the 4th and the final part of my speech is about research. Okay, so this will be mainly relevant to the staff, okay, less relevant to the students. But I know that some of the students came on Saturday, and I'm very impressed with the fact that as undergraduates, you're already thinking about writing papers. At least if you're not going to publish your papers externally, it's important good practice to write dissertations. Okay, so some of this advice can relate to your dissertations as well. And some of the advice is the same that I relayed on Saturday, so apologies for those who've heard this twice. Now, in terms of our career progression in Hong Kong, there are really only two things that count, and those are being well liked by your colleagues, okay, and as you know, a lot of academics are sometimes difficult people to deal with, but being well liked is important, okay, and second is your research productivity. Okay, teaching is important, but those two things are more important. Okay, being well liked and research productivity. Research productivity not only includes what you publish, but also it includes grants. Okay, what I mean by grants are external competitive grants, usually from national governments, whereby you bring money into the law school for things like research assistant and equipment, computing, books, travel expenses, all these sorts of things. And in Hong Kong, as elsewhere, research grants, external research grants, are quickly becoming an end in themselves rather than a means to the actual end of publishing. Whether or not this is a good thing, doesn't matter, but what it does represent is the standards of hard sciences creeping into our legal scholarship. So think about it if you were a lecturer in physics or chemistry, okay, your main task is to get money from the government for your project so you can set up a laboratory and then you can employ people, to work on your experiment. This kind of model is now becoming more common in law schools. I will apply to the Hong Kong government based on a project and get some money and then hire a research team, okay, that will help me towards my publications. So, that's all well and good, you think, but what do grants have to do with internationalization? Well, I mentioned grants are typically awarded by governments. Okay, they're typically awarded by the education department. And here I see the Ministry of Education. Okay, I'd be surprised if the Indonesian government did not award research grants for particular projects. The problem is that the research grants are typically limited to people who work in that country. Okay, so let's say the Indonesian grants are only available to people working in Indonesian universities. Same for Hong Kong, same for Australia. So one way to get access to the money from different governments is to partner with a foreign scholar. And so if you have a collaboration with two academics, one from, let's say, Hong Kong and one from, let's say, Indonesia, you can access the funding bodies of both institutions. And it means the grant belongs to both of you. You can put it on both of your CVs. You can put it on both of your faculty websites and get around those particular rules. Sometimes projects involve more than two investigators. They may even involve 3 people or 4 people from different countries, all working on the same project. Again, that's a little bit like this scientific lab approach, okay, the laboratory. So we're certainly encouraged to partner with foreign scholars when we draft our grant applications to the Hong Kong government. And what I have heard as well is that the Hong Kong government likes to prioritise those grant applications that feature a mix of domestic and foreign scholars. Okay, they give them higher priority when awarding the money because they're trying to internationalise education in Hong Kong. One of the problems, though, with this is that the subject matter must still be concerned with Hong Kong or China. Remember that this is public money, okay? This is money that comes from the taxpayer. And so the Ministry of Education, the Department of Education want to see that the money they award for these projects will somehow benefit society in the home jurisdiction. Okay, so our grants that we receive somehow need to benefit Hong Kong or mainland China. The way to get around that is typically through comparative research. So if I were to partner with someone in Australia, my project would involve some comparison between the laws of Hong Kong and the laws of Australia, for example. So that's a little bit about grants. And next I want to give some advice on publishing. Okay, publishing and how publishing can contribute towards internationalization and being cited by an international audience. Most of these tips that I'm going to give apply to individuals rather than to the institution. And the reason that's important is because it recognizes that individuals, you guys as students, and also staff, have a role to play in the internationalization of Trisakti law faculty rather than just the Dean, okay, rather than just the staff. It's also down to individuals and the relationships that you cultivate with people overseas. So the first thing I want to say is about journals, okay, and I said this on Saturday as well. Western legal journals have a jurisdictional bias towards articles which deal with Western legal systems. So if I try to publish an article about Hong Kong's law in a British journal, often it will be rejected because I'm not writing about British law. Okay, so, and that's somewhat the case in the UK, but it's especially the case in the US. Okay, the US is very closed, right, its publication market to outsiders. So what do we do? Okay, one of the good options, one of the solutions is to publish in regional journals. And there are now a number of very good regional journals published by Asian universities that publish just these sort of papers, okay, particularly papers that have a broader focus looking at 2 or more Asian countries. So what are these journals? Okay, I've got a short list for you. Asian Journal of Comparative Law, Asian Journal of International Law, Asian Journal of Law and Society, the Australian Journal of Asian Law, published by the University of Melbourne, and finally, the Asia Pacific Law Review. And the Asia Pacific Law Review is published by my employer, okay, City University of Hong Kong. Within that journal, the Asia Pacific Law Review, we publish pieces that focus on legal research from across the Asia Pacific region, in particular comparative stuff, but not exclusively. And it is a boost to our international profile. And the reason I say that is that people who may not have heard of our law school have certainly heard of our journal. Okay, so the journal is another means to boost your international profile. Second piece of advice on publishing. I already mentioned collaborating on grants. The same applies to collaborating on papers. It's good to have international co-authors. Okay, having international co-authors does a few things. First of all, you get free feedback on your work. Okay, you send it to your person you're writing with. Same for students. Okay, if you're writing a paper with someone else, obviously, I don't want you writing your assignments with more than one person. Okay, that's probably not allowed according to the rules. But if you're writing an academic paper with more than one person, you get free feedback. You send it to the other person. They will review it through a different set of eyes, a different perspective, and that will benefit your paper. Second, collaborative work overcomes some barriers. Okay, it overcomes barriers in terms of visas, in terms of collecting data, so fieldwork, and also in terms of language difficulties. And third, collaborative work gets read more, okay, and it gets cited more. If you publish with another foreign scholar, you are writing for 2 audiences, okay, your domestic audience and the foreign audience, and it tends to be read more and cited more, and there are statistics, that support that notion. The third tip is about, publicizing your work, and the work that tends to be most accessible tends to be cited the most, and that's not surprising. The problem with this is that journals are very specific about copyright, and they don't want you, say if you publish a piece in the Asian Journal of Comparative Law, they don't want you just dumping the article on the internet because you are breaching the copyright of the journal publisher. How do we get around this? Well, there are a number of ways. You can set up a personal website. You can post a version of your paper on a commercial website like SSRN, academia.edu, ResearchGate. I know that some of you are already familiar with these websites. And what you want really is a version of your article that's available free of charge on the internet for anybody to read. You want people to be able to find your work through Google, and that is going to boost the international profile of your scholarship. How many of you, the students here, complete your assignments using research through Google Scholar? Okay, probably most of you, right? I do that for some of my papers, okay? Some of the research, finding new articles, comes from Google Scholar. So that means you want your papers, your writing, being available to everyone, okay, to boost your profile. The fourth point is about conferences, and I'm nearly done here. Okay, the fourth point is about conferences, and in particular international conferences. These are really important. Okay, conferences enable you to get feedback on your work. It enables you to find out what other people are writing about, what the latest state of the field is. And conferences may give you an artificial deadline forcing you to write. How do you attend conferences? Well, research grants typically pay for you to attend conferences. Your own faculty may pay for you to attend conferences. We have a particular budget for this, to attend conferences. And most of us use this budget for one conference or more than one conference, particularly for places close to Hong Kong, which are cheaper to travel to. For instance, after this, this coming weekend, I'm going to Hanoi in Vietnam. The annual meeting of the Asian Law and Society Association is happening in Hanoi, and I will be speaking on a panel there about Hong Kong, a particular paper about Hong Kong criminal law. On my panel are scholars from Indonesia. There is an Indonesian scholar, Vietnam and Pakistan, and the moderator is an American guy who works in Taiwan, at a university in Taiwan. So you can see that will be a great opportunity for me to receive feedback from people from different countries and to promote, my university. My final point is about networking generally, okay, not just at conferences, but also networking with people you know from your student days, people you know from your research. I think it's really important to maintain these relationships, to maintain friendships with people. And that means even people who are just acquaintances, people who you may not know very well, or perhaps people who you may not ever have met, but you admire their work because you've read it on the internet. Every time you go to a new city, a new place, I think it's important to be brave and to contact people and to go and have coffee with them and discuss their work. Okay? You never know when these types of relationships will become useful. And as you do this, it's also important to talk positively about your own law school, about Trisakti University Law Faculty, and that will eventually pay dividends. On Saturday, for those who are here, I mentioned the concept of an elevator pitch. That means a 2-minute speech. When you're stuck in an elevator with someone, you need to have a rehearsed or a prepared speech for 2 minutes to be able to tell the other person about what you're working on, why it's important, and why you bring a new perspective that perhaps other writers haven't brought before. So that's called an elevator pitch. It doesn't literally need to be in an elevator. It could be on a plane, it could be on a bus, okay? It could be in a taxi, it could be in a restaurant. But the point is that you need to have a short prepared speech talking about yourself and your work. Now, what I want to say today is that you can also have a 2-minute elevator pitch about your law school. Okay, if you're proud of where you go to law school, it's important to have a 2-minute kind of rehearsed pitch so that when you meet the stranger in the elevator or on the bus or on the plane, you can talk about your own law school and its unique strengths and programs within 2 minutes. So if you haven't already thought about that, maybe we can practice that later on. And I think I'll finish by saying that this person-to-person contact, okay, through the elevator pitch, through meeting people face-to-face, is the most important way to boost the international profile of your law school. And I'll end with that. Thank you.
Daniel, you can sit here. Okay, thanks for your insight. It's it's very interesting, especially for us in the as a faculty member, because it gives us about so many experience that your faculty have before. Baiklah, jadi oke, saya menggunakan bahasa Indonesia ya karena kebetulan acara ini bilingual. Daniel sendiri punya kemampuan bahasa Indonesia yang sebenarnya sangat-sangat baik. Hanya saja beliau agak malu saja menggunakannya.
Cukup.
Oke.
Cukup untuk paham saja.
Kalau misalnya IELTS ini mungkin Daniel bahasa Indonesia mungkin udah 9 atau 8. Oke, enough. Langsung aja, jadi ada beberapa poin menarik yang dibahas oleh Daniel. Di antaranya adalah, ini mungkin masukan juga buat kita yang dari fakultas, dari staff, terutama mengenai ide-ide mengenai beberapa jalan yang bisa dipilih ketika melakukan internasionalisasi. Seperti contohnya, memang ada tekanan untuk meng-hire foreign staff, tapi itu bisa diakali misalnya dengan menjamu akademisi luar yang ingin melakukan penelitian di Indonesia. Mungkin itu masukan juga yang baik, terutama kebetulan di sini ada Bu Dekan juga. Selain itu ada beberapa masukan juga dari Daniel, seperti misalnya bagaimana menggunakan penelitian dilakukan pemerintah untuk melakukan penelitian bersama dengan kolaborasi penelitian bersama dengan akademisi di luar. Dan yang menarik lagi adalah bagaimana juga jurnal juga bisa dimanfaatkan. Saya tahu Mas Pranoto ini kan mengelola jurnal juga. Dan walaupun itu tidak dikelola oleh fakultas, tapi mungkin bisa juga dalam kerjasama dengan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Trisakti. Itu mungkin yang buat fakultas, tapi beberapa hal yang menarik juga, terutama yang buat student ya. Karena kebetulan ini juga nggak cuma buat mahasiswa yang sekarang sedang berkuliah di Fakultas Hukum Trisakti, tapi juga buat saya atau Iska sebagai pengajar di sini. Karena kebetulan kami berdua, dan tadi ada Mas Adivian juga, kita pengen juga misalnya melakukan studi S3 gitu. Mungkin fakultasnya Daniel yaitu City University of Hong Kong bisa jadi opsi juga, terutama buat teman-teman pengajar di Trisakti yang hendak melanjutkan studinya. Tapi mungkin yang penting juga untuk terutama buat teman-teman mahasiswa yang hadir di sini adalah, saya tahu banyak dari mahasiswa yang ingin melanjutkan studinya ke luar negeri gitu. Apalagi kan banyak juga mahasiswa Trisakti yang sangat tertarik di bidang ingin bekerja di bidang corporate law. Dan seperti yang tadi Daniel katakan, di Hong Kong sendiri mereka mempunyai program seperti itu, gitu. Corporate law atau bahkan international law. Sudah sangat terinternasionalisasi lah City University of Hong Kong gitu. Jadi akan jadi hal yang baik juga misalnya teman-teman yang mau melakukan studi keluar, melanjutkan entah mengambil master, karena saya tahu ini juga menjadi tren buat buat orang-orang Indonesia yang ingin menjadi lawyer, itu menjadi tren untuk mengambil master di luar gitu. Karena ya itu entah kenapa buat yang saya lihat ya, terutama dengan teman-teman saya yang menjadi lawyer dan lain-lain, banyak dari mereka yang punya gelar master, karena itu mungkin kelihatan lebih meyakinkan buat orang-orang Indonesia gitu. Mungkin penjelasan singkatnya sampai sini. Mungkin setelah ini kita akan masuk ke sesi tanya jawab. Saya mulai dulu terutama untuk rekan-rekan yang ada di sini. Apakah kira-kira ada yang mau bertanya, entah itu mengenai kemungkinan untuk melanjutkan studi dan lain-lain? Saya buka dulu satu sesi. Ya, tadi ada yang mau bertanya, silakan Mas. Mas bisa melakukan pertanyaan, atau Mbak atau Mas bisa melakukan Oke Mbak, bisa bertanya baik itu melalui bahasa Inggris atau bahasa Indonesia, karena kebetulan Daniel juga punya kemampuan berbahasa Indonesia yang baik gitu. Oke, silakan Mbak.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Daniel, for the deep conversation you're sharing. First of all, my first question is, what is the selling point we have to choose City University of Hong Kong besides Hong Kong University, like the oldest one, and the other one is the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And the second two is, you took your first degree Asian study, but after that you took criminal law as your LLM and maybe your GED. Yeah, could you share your own opinion or your thought why you choose criminal law for the rest of your career and study? Thank you.
Thank you. So let me answer the second question first, because it's the easier one. And I mentioned this on Saturday as well. I know that at Trisakti, for your Sarjana Hukum, you have different majors, right? You can take international law, or you can take business law, you can take penal law, constitutional, etc. In Australia, and in fact in most common law jurisdictions, including in Hong Kong, there are no majors. Okay, if you take what's called a qualifying law degree, and by qualifying it basically means a law degree that entitles you to practice law in that country, you have to take all of the subjects. So I had to take constitutional, I had to take criminal, I had to take administrative, I had to take contracts, torts, everything. So there are no majors. It was only, as you say, when I went to my master's degree and my PhD degree that I started to focus more on criminal law. Now, the first reason is, well, you have to choose something. Okay, if you're going to keep going in your studies, it's very difficult to remain a generalist. Okay, I know that a lot of lawyers are generalists. Okay, they argue different types of cases, but as you go through your academic studies, your focus must narrow on something. Okay, Satrio, for example, constitutional law. Okay, it's very difficult because law is a very difficult subject. Okay, and it's very difficult to become an expert in everything. Okay, nobody's trying to do that. We just want expertise on something very narrow. And when you write a PhD, your expertise is confined to a very narrow question, okay, based on one subject. Now, why did I choose criminal law, having said all of that? Criminal law for me was the most interesting because it involved relationships between human beings, between people. Personally, and I'm not trying to, recommend this to anybody who enjoys corporate law, but personally I didn't like corporate law because I was more interested in the relationships between people. Okay, so that led me to areas like family law. Okay, I should have mentioned that when I practiced for a brief time, some of it was in family law, some of it was in child protection, actually, and most of it was in criminal law. But this involves the relationship between human beings. And I think that was more interesting to me than the relationship between companies and businesses. Also, the other reason was that criminal law to me involves liberty. Okay, the cases are the most important because to argue the cases correctly will make a difference in the liberty of people. Okay, whether they go to prison or not, and certainly for my PhD, whether they received the pidana mati or not. Okay, so to me that was more important than business cases, which may deal with quite a lot of money, okay, trillions of rupiah, right? To me that was not as important as cases involving the liberty of individuals. So that's why I became interested in criminal law, and the other thing I tried to do was combine my interest in criminal law with my interest in Southeast Asia, okay, and Indonesia in particular, but the other countries in Southeast Asia as well. So that's where I got to, that's why I wrote my dissertation on the topic I did. Now, the other question is more difficult to answer, I think. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are 3 law schools in Hong Kong. City University, there's also the Chinese University of Hong Kong and Hong Kong University. And as you say, Hong Kong University is the oldest one. We are the second established, and Chinese University Law School was established third, although its university was established before our university. But if you see, our law faculty was before their law faculty. There are actually 8 public universities in Hong Kong and 3 or 4 private universities, but only 3 of them have law schools. So it's quite unusual actually to have law schools in Hong Kong. Now, in terms of what our law school brings in particular, I think if I'm not trying to suggest that you choose us over the others. Okay, you need to make your own decision if that's what you want to do. A degree in Hong Kong, but we have different subject matter strengths compared with the other law schools. Okay, and in particular, what we are very good at is comparison between China and Hong Kong. Okay, Hong Kong University's law school is mainly concerned with domestic political developments in Hong Kong. Okay, the Court of Final Appeal, which is like the Mahkamah Agung, right, of Hong Kong. Their scholarship, focuses on this aspect, whereas we focus more, and I'm speaking in general, on the relationship between Hong Kong and China. Okay, that's one aspect we look at. The other strength that we have is in maritime law. Okay, so Hong Kong is a centre for shipping, a bit like Singapore, and we have a special centre on commercial and maritime law that the other law schools don't have. And I suppose the third aspect is that the international profile of our staff differs a little bit from the other law schools. Okay, we have a wider variety of staff from different jurisdictions than the other law schools do. But in terms of specific programs, the only thing I would say is do your research. Okay, look on the websites. If you're interested in studying with us or visiting us, okay, do your research and look at the individual courses and consider why you might want to take one course or another. Let me talk also about some practical issues. Chinese University has a great campus. I like going there. Okay, it has more space on its campus, but it's very far from the city. Okay, so whereas City University is in Kowloon, it's right in the city of Hong Kong. So again, like Trisakti. Okay, these are practical considerations that you need to think about when you go to study or to work in a place. If it's your first time in Hong Kong, I suspect that you want to be based in the city, okay, and have access to public transport and have access to shops around you and this sort of thing. Whereas Chinese University in particular is a campus-based university that is more sort of out in the countryside, okay, a bit like University of Indonesia, right? It's too far from the centre of Jakarta, right? Terlalu jauh. Hong Kong University is in the centre of the city. Okay. I don't think it's wrong for me to say this, but Hong Kong University is the oldest. Okay, and they are number one, right, in Hong Kong. There's no sort of denying that. We and Chinese University are always fighting to be number two. So Hong Kong U is number one, but the downside of that is for LLM admission and certainly for PhD admission is more competitive. Okay, and in fact, you need to consider where you're going to get admission to, as well as rankings. And certainly, what I'd encourage you to do is not just to think about rankings, but actually to think about the program. Okay, the subjects you want to take, the supervisor you want to study with, and if that's Hong Kong U or Chinese U, that's fine. I have absolutely no problem with that. But certainly, a lot of students are fixated on rankings, okay, to the exclusion of substance. And in terms of substance, I think we offer a pretty good, program in comparison with the other two law schools. But thanks for your question.
Oke, ada lagi ada dua penanya di sana. 3 ya, ada. Wah, cukup banyak. Oke, mungkin 3 dulu. Yang 2 di sana itu Mbak, Mas, dan yang di sini nih. Tadi ada yang Mas yang di depan. Saya nggak ada salah pronounce kan itu. Mohon maaf kayak tadi. Probably. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. Yes, 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 Mas. Thanks, Ibu Dekan. Oke, ya Mas silakan pertanyaan. Anda bisa pakai bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris ya, terserah enaknya aja.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Nathan, and I'm a first year student from Faculty of Law. So my question is, in terms of academic context, is there any differences when we study abroad? For example, between a university in Hong Kong and a university in Australia, or is everything the same?
Hanya ada satu pertanyaan, ya? Yeah.
Only one question.
Yeah. Okay, so maksud Mas,
Difference in academic context, like the curriculum.
exchange student,
No,
as
no,
an
no.
exchange student, or you mean to take a degree?
No,
degree.
take a degree.
Degree. Okay, now, I suppose in some senses we compete in the same market. You're right. Okay, so I'm from Australia, as you know, and international education or foreign students are the third biggest export in Australia's economy. I think the first two are probably coal and uranium or something, but the third biggest is education. And as you know, a lot of students from Indonesia, China, India, okay, all go to Australia to study. And in some senses, you're right. We in Hong Kong, we are competing over the same talent. Okay, we want to attract students to study abroad or study as international students in Hong Kong, where they might otherwise go to Australia, or they might go to New Zealand, or they might go to Singapore. I suppose one of the unique advantages Hong Kong has, two things. First of all, it is the gateway to China. Okay, so if you're interested in Chinese legal issues, but even Chinese business issues, okay, Hong Kong is the place to learn about China within a English-speaking context and also within a more democratic context. Okay, so that's an advantage that we have. Maybe the other advantage is that compared with a country like Australia, Australia is a big country, okay, has 25 million people now. Hong Kong only has 7 million. It's essentially one city, and it is purely a trade and a service-based economy, as I mentioned in my speech. So Hong Kong necessarily needs to look outwards. What does that mean for studying law? It means that we're very much focused on the comparative, okay, and the comparative context in the common law world. Okay, Hong Kong compared with Singapore, compared with Malaysia, compared with Australia, New Zealand, UK, as opposed to a country like Australia, which is less focused on comparison and less outward looking because it has a bigger domestic market. Okay, so that's one of the reasons. I suppose also, lifestyle-wise, again, I think these are important factors to think about if you're going to study abroad. Hong Kong is a very exciting city to live in. It's very beautiful as well. Shops are open all night. Okay, you can get a bowl of noodles, at 2 o'clock in the morning. Many Australian cities, you can't do that. Okay, the shops shut at 7 or 8 p.m. Right, everything's quiet at night time. So it depends whether you're a day person or a night, a night person, I suppose. What else in terms of the curriculum? Yeah, so really the curriculum, I think, in all of the law schools in Hong Kong has an outward focus to it. Okay, because it's a small place, so we must look outwards. Whereas the curriculum in a place like Australia is a little bit more inward focused because the The main focus is on the domestic market. I hope that answers your question. Do you have anything else to follow up on about the experiences of foreign students, or what? Have I answered your question?
Nothing else, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Buat jawaban yang tadi, ini perlu ditekanin ya, berarti jawaban dari Daniel adalah Hong Kong itu punya pendidikan hukum yang melihat keluar. Nah itu yang menarik. Kenapa? Berarti kalian gak cuma akan belajar, ya memang sistemnya common law, tapi kalian gak akan cuma belajar common law yang ada di Hong Kong aja, tapi di negara-negara lain, dan itu akan sangat berguna misalnya untuk kalian kalau studi di sana. Kenapa? Karena ya misalnya Indonesia, kalian jadi lawyer nanti, klien kalian kan akan datang dari banyak negara dan lain-lain. Jadi itu pertimbangkan ya, hal-hal yang seperti itu kan membawa keuntungan buat karir kalian ke depannya. Oke, silakan penanya berikutnya tadi, ya Mbak yang di sana. Ya.
Hi, my name is Nazneen. I'm a first-year law student, and my question to you is, you said that you were a teaching assistant, right, and an associate professor, and my question is, being that Hong Kong is a country that adopts the common law system, do you find it difficult teaching students that have learned the civil law system previously, as in if you were teaching a graduate class that have learned the civil law curriculum, do you find it a little bit hard or time consuming to reteach common law to them? Thank you.
Okay, that's a very good question. I think generally the answer is no, because one of the courses that I teach is the Introduction to the Common Law. Okay, now this is a compulsory course for first-year students. Okay, so basically they're coming straight out of high school with very little grounding in any type of law, let alone civil law, common law, socialist law, Islamic law, anything. Okay, they only know about high school subjects. Okay, so that is the level at which I pitch my teaching at for that subject. And that is also the class I mentioned that we attract the exchange students into. Okay, so the students who come over from France or Belgium or the Netherlands or Germany, they take that, and it's a first-year course. So they are usually in third year or fourth year, but it's perhaps the first time they have studied, common law subjects, so they take the first-year course. So I think it's not so much a problem for them. I think they find it easy enough, and it's not so much a problem for me to teach them. And I think you would be surprised at once you immerse yourself in a common law jurisdiction, how easy it is to understand common law reasoning. The major difference, of course, if we want to get technical, the major difference is the role of case law. Okay, the role of cases in establishing rules, which, as I understand it, in Indonesia, okay, you have the jurisprudency, right? But very rarely do cases establish rules that other courts must follow. In Hong Kong, if a court at the appellate level, Court of Appeal, Court of Final Appeal, once they decide a case, it establishes a rule that other courts must follow. So that's the major difference, okay? That's something that our civil law students need to learn. But what is not different, what is the same, are methods of interpreting legislation, which you have to do in Indonesia, of course, all the time, and methods of interpreting constitution. So there's more in common than you might think. The other thing I want to say about this is that in an area like criminal law, and also civil litigation actually as well, countries are now beginning to adopt each other's techniques. So again, that helps to sort of ease the path to studying the law of the other system. And I'll give you an example. In criminal litigation in Hong Kong and in civil litigation in Hong Kong, there is now an extensive use of pre-trial hearings. Okay, before there were no pre-trial hearings, and we just used to go to court and have an adversarial process where one party argued against the lawyer of another party. But now the judge is involved a lot more in pre-trial conferences to try to sort out a lot of the dispute, a lot of the issues between the parties before the trial begins. And where did they get this from? They got this from civil law countries, okay, where the judge has more power in an inquisitorial role rather than just a passive bystander who sits back in the common law system and waits for the two parties to argue against each other. So increasingly countries are borrowing from each other, and so I think if you were to study in a common law jurisdiction, you could find similarities with what you've already learned. Pra-peradilan. Pra-peradilan. Ya, betul.
Thank you so much.
Oke, udah terjawab semua ya kira-kira. Mungkin lanjut ke penanya berikutnya, silakan Mas. Ya, silakan Mas.
Hello, I am Raihan Wardana from Student of Law Trisakti. I want to ask, is there any minimum of score for TOEFL and IELTS in City University of Hong Kong? Thank you, sir.
I think first thing is this changes from year to year. So I think you need to check the website for the latest information, but usually it is 7 on the IELTS score for every subject, or every reading, writing, speaking, listening. But we occasionally have discussions about, to change that. And certainly the score, I think 7 is higher than the other subjects in the university. So if you were to study science, I think it's 6.5 or something, right? But law, we focus on text more, so the score is, I think it's 7. But again, please check the website. Also, I suppose it's a little bit of marketing. That is lower than in, say, the UK. UK, they need 7.5, right? So slightly easier.
Thank you, sir.
I'll just tell you a short story about that. I had a student who now graduated, and she was one of my research assistants, and she's very clever, very bright student. She's from Taiwan, and obviously I mentioned that all our teaching is done in English. So lectures in English, seminars in English, writing in English, but her first language, being Taiwanese, is Mandarin, and at home she speaks Mandarin in Taipei. Now, she graduated from our program. She got a very good score. And then she got admission to her master's degree in UCL in London, University College London. Unfortunately, she failed the IELTS. Okay, so she couldn't, and she tried it, I think, 5 times, and she couldn't get the 7.5, I think, for each component. So she had to give up her place in UCL. So it just shows you that I understand how difficult those tests are. So this is a person who did a whole law degree in English and worked as a research assistant for me in English. Okay, working with mostly English sources, some Chinese sources, but she couldn't pass the IELTS to go to the UK. Right, 7.5. So we are lower at 7, which I think helps.
So it's already changed, right? Because I remember 2 years ago I also applied for your faculty master program, but it's still, the requirement is still 6.5. Maybe it's increased. Yeah, it's changed. Oke, ada pertanyaan berikutnya. Tadi kan ada beberapa yang mau nanya di belakang. Ya, silakan. Ada bertiga orang ya. Mbak itu 2 sama Mas yang di sana. Oke. Mungkin siapa duluan yang Mas yang di atas itu mungkin. Already changed.
Sorry, sir. My name is Firman Dana. You can call me Firman or Dana. I want to ask two questions. The first is there any kind of hardships for students who comes from the country who is civil law? In Hong Kong, of course, we use the common law, right? Is there any kind of hardships, and can you tell me what are the hardships? And the second question is, I don't know if this is off the topic or not, but how is the implication of the death sentence in countries on Asian and in Europe? Thank you.
Apakah Mas bisa memperjelaskan pertanyaanmu yang kedua?
Yang kedua.
Yang kedua.
Kalau misalnya susah pakai bahasa Indonesia nggak? It's okay.
Kalau untuk pertanyaan kedua, gimana implikasi dari hukuman mati di negara-negara Asia dan juga di negara-negara Eropa?
Tidak ada di Eropa.
Tidak ada.
Tidak ada pidana mati di mana-mana di Eropa.
Kalau untuk di Asia sendiri dan juga di Indonesia?
Baiklah, saya akan bertanya, saya akan menjawab ya. So the first question that he asked was about the hardships faced by students trained in civil law jurisdictions, and it's very similar to your question over here. So the way I answered over here was that it's not as difficult as you think. Okay, once you're immersed in that world, okay, you will find similarities and some differences with what you have already studied. Now, having said that, really, for students from civil law jurisdictions, they tend to come to Hong Kong to study LLM degrees and PhD degrees. They don't come to study LLB or JD. Okay, so they're not coming to do their sarjana hukum, right? The equivalent of that. What that means is that when students from civil law countries like China come to Hong Kong, they're coming to specialize, to focus on courses in just one area or perhaps one or two areas. And I mentioned some examples in my speech. Public international law, okay, that doesn't depend on whether you're from civil law or common law. International arbitration doesn't depend on whether you come from civil law or common law. Shipping, okay, this doesn't depend on whether you're from civil law, common law. International trade law, okay, or international economic law, this again doesn't depend on civil law, common law. So these are the sorts of subjects that our students from China and from other civil law jurisdictions tend to come to Hong Kong to learn about, right? Rather than they're not coming to learn about contracts or torts or criminal law. Okay, these are areas that are quite specific to the common law. Okay, so I hope that answers your first question. Second question about the death sentence. Well, it is a little bit off the topic of legal education, but it's something I know a bit about, so I'm happy to answer. There is no death penalty in Europe except for one country. Do you know what that country is? Belarus. Okay, Belarus is the only one in Europe that now still uses the death sentence. Even Russia doesn't use it anymore. In fact, to join the Council of Europe, which is one of their political bodies, in order for countries to join, they have to abolish the death penalty to join. And this is what some countries in Eastern Europe, not Belarus, but the other ones, all did in order to join the Council of Europe and to join the EU. Okay, they must abolish the death penalty first before they do this. So that's domestically in Europe. Now, where this affects, a place like Indonesia is usually to do with extradition agreements. Okay, so if let's say a foreigner or an Indonesian person were to commit murder or were to commit drug trafficking in Indonesia and then somehow flee to the airport, okay, and end up in a European country or in Australia. those countries would not extradite the offender, whether doesn't matter if it's an Indonesian person or a foreigner, they would not send that person back to Indonesia to face trial unless the Attorney General of Indonesia gave a written guarantee that they would not face the death penalty. Okay, that is how strongly foreign governments feel about this issue. But also, I understand how strongly the Indonesian government feels about this issue. But it's the same for China. Okay, the EU or Australia or Canada, they would not send a Chinese citizen back to China pursuant to an extradition agreement if that person would face the death penalty in a trial. And this, from time to time, affects countries like Indonesia in Asia who retain the death sentence. So, in that sense, it does affect the international relations of both countries, even if, and I want to stress this, even if the defendant is from Indonesia. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's a foreigner or an Indonesian citizen. So this is an issue that comes up, quite often.
Oke, Mas, udah cukup jawabannya tuh. Oke, mungkin kalau misalnya Masnya lagi riset soal death penalty atau mungkin ngambil skripsi soal itu, silakan berdiskusi lebih lanjut dengan Daniel, misalnya lewat email atau apa, karena kebetulan Daniel juga penelitian soal itu di disertasinya. Oke, mungkin dua penanya ini terakhir ya, karena kebetulan waktu kita akan segera habis buat makan siang. Silakan Mbak yang di situ.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Viswari. So the first question is, why is Hong Kong want people from different jurisdiction to study or as their staff to work there? Is there any specific purpose, like such as wanting to upgrade the law or any other reason for it? And the second question is, for those who have finished their studies in Hong Kong, is it possible for them to able to stay there and work there as corporate lawyer or any areas of law? Or do we have to change our citizenship, or we can still hold our current citizenship to work there? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, these are both very good questions. And let me deal with the second one first. I'm not an expert in the immigration system of Hong Kong, but I do believe that there is a type of post-study work visa. Okay, so that means if you have undertaken a degree in Hong Kong, like a one-year master's degree, you are permitted to remain in order to work there for, I think, 2 years. Okay, and during that 2 years, you need to, the obligation is on you to find an employer who's willing to sponsor your visa for a longer period. Okay, so yes, again, I'm not an expert on the immigration system. I had to get a visa, to go into Hong Kong, but I never got a degree in Hong Kong, so I'm not familiar with this particular category. But as I understand it, particularly for PhDs, I know that definitely exists. I think also for LLMs, if you undertake a degree there, you can stay. Okay, you may need to change visa categories, but you can stay. Her first question was why, and it's I need to this a little bit. Why are we so interested in internationalization? And it's a question I think you should ask yourselves as well. Okay, why is Trisakti interested in internationalization? Why are universities in Australia interested in internationalization? Why do we all care about this? Okay, and there are a number of reasons. One of the reasons I already mentioned in my presentation, and that was that Hong Kong is a small place. Okay, it's a big city, but there is nothing except one city. It's a little bit like Singapore or Dubai. Okay, we must look outward because that is the basis of our economy. We don't have much of a manufacturing industry. We certainly don't have primary industry. Okay, there's no farming, there's no mining in Hong Kong. We focus really on people and services. And that, in all sorts of areas, not just education, that forces us to look out. okay, rather than to look in. There is simply not enough of a domestic market to continue. The other, I suppose politically, you know, there are a few other answers. Politically, I think Hong Kong likes to market itself as the international version of China, okay, because it is, you know, part of the People's Republic, but it's got its own special political status. And in order to maintain that and perpetuate that, the universities and the schools, okay, need to market themselves as we are China, but we are international China. Okay, we speak English and we have a different legal system and we want to attract, you know, immigrants from around the world. And one of those immigrants was myself, right? I moved there for these very reasons. So that's that's another sort of political aspect why Hong Kong focuses on internationalization. I think it also provides you with there's a recognition that it provides you with a richer experience as a student. Okay, it's more interesting if you are studying next to people from different countries from around the world, particularly in a place which is, how do I put this, you know, ethnically, you know, the vast majority of Hong Kong is Chinese, okay, 92%. And let's say Indonesia is a much more diverse country ethnically with its ethnic groups than Hong Kong is. And how do we resolve that? Well, one way we can resolve that is through getting people in on visas to work and also getting students in on visas to work. So it's, I think, to the benefit of everyone that we have a more diverse student body and a more diverse workforce. So I hope that answered your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Oke, ya terakhir ini.
I am Sakadisa Kaulika. I want to ask question. First question, out of the 90 universities that cooperate with the University of Hong Kong, not one of them is a university from Indonesia. So how can I or maybe one of us willing to study and is it possible for those of us who want to do student exchange if there is no collaboration between our university? Second question, can we
Sorry,
get...
could you repeat the first question?
Okay, sorry.
Nah, pakai bahasa aja nggak apa-apa.
Udah nyatetnya pakai Inggris soalnya. Out of the 19 universities that cooperate with the University of Hong Kong, no one of them is a university from Indonesia. So how can I or maybe one of us willing to study and is it possible for those of us who want to do student exchange if there is no collaboration between our university?
Let me answer that question first, and then you can answer you can ask the second question, right? But
Okay.
let me answer that one first. Very good question again. Okay, so you must have been listening carefully to my speech, right? If you knew that there were 19 different countries we have signed exchange agreements with. Not one of those countries is Indonesia, of course. So how do you study in Hong Kong? Well, the simple answer is you cannot do it as an exchange student. If you are undertaking your sarjana hukum here, you can't come to Hong Kong as an exchange student at the moment. Even if, and I'm working on this, even if we were to sign an exchange agreement between Trisakti and City University, that would probably take 2 years to implement, and by that time you probably will have graduated, right? So the simple answer is, if you want to study in Hong Kong, think about doing an LLM there. And the other point is, I think before you make these significant decisions and sometimes expensive decisions about your life, try and visit. Okay, just come to Hong Kong to visit, and I'm more than happy to show any of you around the campus and around the Kowloon, which is the area of Hong Kong in which we are. And so just visit. Okay, there's no more quarantine, so the borders are open, and so come to visit and to try and experience what life, or try and picture what life might be like there. But as regards the exchange, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that we have not yet signed any agreements with Indonesian universities, and it's something that I will be working on. Although, unfortunately, I'm not powerful enough yet in my faculty to be able to just unilaterally sign the agreement. Okay, I need the permission of my dean right before I would do anything like that. So thank you for the question. What's your second question?
The second, can we get a PhD without masters?
Again, very good question. You guys ask very good questions. Yes, you can. You can, but your marks in your undergraduate must be top marks. Okay, so I'm not sure what maybe Satrio can explain to me what the classifications in your degree are, but typically you can do that, but only if you receive, in the British system it would be called first class honours in your Sarjana Hukum. In the American system it would be called magna cum laude. So if you are in the top bracket of your degree, then you can go straight to a PhD. The problem is that to do a PhD, you need a very clear understanding of what question it is you want to research. And remember that once you come up with this question, you are going to be stuck with this question for 3 or 4 years. So you want to really make sure that you are very interested in this particular topic. And often that comes with a little bit more life experience. Okay, so often I started my PhD when I was 27. Okay, 27 through to 30. It's very difficult. It's possible, and I do know people who started their PhDs at 22. Okay, but the problem is that again, you're stuck with this one topic. So I think sometimes it helps to get a broader understanding of the law before you decide usually it's about, between 25 and 30, that people start PhDs when they know, first of all, that they really want to do a PhD. Okay, they're not just doing it because someone was telling them to do it, but they really want to do it. And secondly, which particular area, okay, they really want to specialize in. So I'm not trying to discourage you. If that's something you really want to do, then you can do it at 22, 23 years old. But usually the entrants are a little bit older than that. Thank you for your question, though.
Okay, then your faculty also have an MPhil program, right? So if you take an MPhil program, it can directly access the PhD. Okay, that's also one option. Okay, thank you very much, Dan, for your insights. It's very important not only for the student, but also for us as a faculty member. And for the student, I think it provides an alternative, because most of the students in Indonesia, if they study abroad, they usually go to Australia or Netherlands. But right now, maybe they have an alternative in Hong Kong. So yeah, that's very, very important information. Okay, mungkin setelah ini buat teman-teman, kalau misalnya ada yang pengen bertanya tapi waktunya nggak ada, mungkin di luar bisa juga bertanya ke Daniel. Misalnya masih ada yang mau bertanya gitu, karena waktu kita sudah habis. Oke, Berta, saya kembali. Gimana? Oh, mau panggil Bu Dekan dulu. Oke. Yeah, they already distributed. Oh, they already have. Yes, but not all. Which interesting.
But before that, we would like to give certificates and placard as form of our appreciation to Mr. Daniel Pasco, which is delivered by Bu Siti Nurbaiti and Pak Pranoto Iskandar. You can take the floor. Okay, we will be having a photo session, so audience, you are permitted to come down.